Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced from alexmerced.com, and what I want to talk about today is why your healthcare is so expensive. The reason is, I enjoy a lot of Vox's podcasts, whether it's the Ezra Klein Show, The Weeds, and now their new show, The Impact. Because while they may have a different perspective than I do, they do a lot of research and really go into the details about some of this stuff, which I find a lot of value in. But in the first episode of their new podcast, The Impact, I do have some very serious issues with the presentation of the information. Which was on healthcare. Basically, they talked about why, mainly they focus on why a hospital bill costs so much, mainly focusing on a facility fee. And that a hospital, for the most part, pretty much just makes up the fee, which to an extent is true. There's a lot of opaqueness in healthcare pricing. A lot of it is because they're trying to hide the things that they're trying to make up for, okay? Because people would be upset if they knew why it costs so much. Okay, and why does it cost so much? Because there's a lot of people, for example, right now, if you are a hospital, you cannot turn people away. So if someone comes in and wants to use the emergency room, you have to treat them. And there's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. That's in the law. You can't just turn somebody away. But the thing is that, so someone comes in, let's say they're in a serious condition, you take care of them, but if they can't pay the bill later, that sucks. You know, people have medical bills, but there's a lot of flexibility in paying those medical bills. You're not really charged financing fees for long as you make some sort of payment every month, and you can kind of do that indefinitely. I mean, you could pay $1 a month, and that can go on forever. So sometimes there's a question of whether your medical bill gets paid, and two, how long it takes to get paid. And the problem is, when you're paying doctors, nurses, etc., you don't pay them when the money comes in, you pay them now. So there's an issue of cash flow. So they got to make sure that they have enough cash coming in for the cash outflow. So that means when they got to price in the fact that, hey, this bill might not be paid for 2 or 3 years. This bill not be paid at all. So the ones that do get paid, so I mean, let's say 70% of your bills get paid, then what you have to do is make sure you price the 70% that gets paid to make up for the 30% that doesn't, plus interest, because you got to factor in the time that you may have to wait to collect that money. So that inflates the cost. Now, how do you know there's such a difference? How can I make that claim? Because you can take a look at cash-only clinics that don't have that problem. They don't have to worry about a certain portion of their bills not being paid. They don't have to worry about how long to wait because they take cash payment up front, and they can oftentimes offer their services at huge discounts to what you have to pay at a traditional medical practice. Now, give it, those prices are still sometimes out of reach for a lot of people, but more reachable by more people than the current prices. And that's why they develop things like direct primary care, where instead of paying for each individual service cash up front, you pay a subscription fee, and that covers all sorts of different services that you use as you need. But those aren't the only things. I mean, even those cash clinics still have inflated costs, whether you take a look at a lot of the other things that are in place that basically limit the supply of care, which drives up the price of care, whether it's basically how expensive a lot of medical innovation is because of the way the FDA process is really expensive to grow through. So they got to recoup those expenses, making a lot of medical equipment very expensive, which may not be as expensive in other countries because they don't have to go through the same process. So in that case, they can offer it there a lot cheaper. But here, you got to recoup those costs to be able to offer it here. So it's a lot more expensive to buy the basic equipment. It's a lot harder to start up a hospital because you have certificate of need law, so you can't even start a hospital unless other hospitals let you. So imagine if I wanted to start a comic book store and I had to get other comic book stores to say it's okay for me to compete with them. That's pretty bizarre. You have all sorts of rules regarding who can and can't practice medical care and what type of medical care, which limits the amount. So while to some extent there are certain people you really want to make sure that they're very qualified for like certain surgeries, etc., there are a lot of basic medical procedures that a lot of people could probably do. Okay, and there has been some move towards a better direction in that, but that's still a thing. Also, just if you take a look at student tuitions and how student tuitions have exploded, mainly due to a lot of student financing programs, that trickles over to healthcare because then doctors are just that much more in debt. Also, all the rules regarding starting medical schools and which medical schools count, all this stuff limits who can be a doctor, which makes doctors more expensive, and also means doctors have more debt that they have to recoup their costs. So all these things drive the cost of healthcare, and all these things, for the most part, can be fixed with markets. Okay, most of these are not the construct of just natural market behavior, but the result of different policies that limit the market's ability to find new solutions and new ways of doing things. Okay, and people will say, well, we can't take that risk with healthcare because healthcare is a matter of life or death. But you take a look at other things that are not life or death, cell phones, etc. There's a lot more access to cell phones than there is to healthcare. I would wish that access to healthcare was like our access to cell phones and the quality of cell phones we can buy even at the poorest level because you allow markets. Okay? It's the things that are that important that you want markets in. Because it's the things that are that important. That's why the things that are that important are the things that we're falling behind in, because that's where we decide, well, how about we don't use that really awesome way of allocating resources and figuring out innovation and better prices and better practices, etc. Nah, we're just going to perfectly top-down design it. Instead, what we now is to have a really top-down design, worst of all worlds, where basically you're paying for really government-regulated care through a third-party payment by someone who's paid for by another third party, your employer. So basically everybody has a say in your healthcare but you. That's not a good healthcare system. And just saying that cutting out 2 out of those 3 people who have a say in your healthcare and saying, well, now only the government has a say in your healthcare, that doesn't necessarily make it any better. Well, it might make it marginally better, but it won't make it ideal. Like with markets, how about we give you control over your healthcare, bottom line. Okay, so my name is Alex Merced from alexmerced.com. Have a great day and enjoy.